107.7 FM. This is True Crime in the Low Country with Jim Cask and the illustrious Elaine Greenwood of Super Woke News. And I'm here with Jim and Elaine. And why does Jim get first billing? I don't know.
Because he's fabulous. And because he has 60,000 followers on TikTok. When I get to that point, and he has a best-selling book, Defending Alec Murdaugh. So I'm happy to take second to Jim Cask.
I just feel so rude about the whole damn thing. Now, let me tell you something, guys. You are the easiest podcast that I do all week.
Really?
And I'll tell you why. You don't take any prompting. Once I introduce you, you're on your own. Now, here's a question. There's a couple of things going on, and I understand that the South Carolina Supreme Court made some kind of decision recently.
Yes.
Let's hit it, and I'm going to sit back and you guys knock yourself out.
Okay, so the Supreme Court yesterday decided to accept certification of the Murdaugh appeal from the ruling that Justice Toll made denying Alec Murdaugh a second trial. And the issue here is Alec Murdaugh's Sixth Amendment rights to a fair trial. And so here's a summary of it. That's actually something I'm quoting from what Diddy Carputli had submitted to the court when he asked back in September of 2023 that a U.S. attorney be appointed to review the conduct of Rebecca Hill, the clerk of the court, who's accused of jury tampering. And so this is what it says. It says, we believe that the statements of the state actor, that would be Rebecca Hill, to the jurors are controlled by, they are restricted by the command of the Sixth Amendment made applicable to the states through the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. It guarantees that the accused shall enjoy the right of a trial by an impartial jury and be confronted with the witnesses against him. As we have said in Turner v. State of Louisiana, the evidence developed against a defendant shall come from the witness stand in a public courtroom where there is a full judicial protection of the defendant's rights of confrontation, of cross-examination, and of counsel. We have followed the undeviating rule that the rights of confrontation and cross-examination are among the most fundamental requirements of a constitutionally fair trial. And then Dick Carpullian goes on to say, Mr. Murdaugh may not be the most popular man in South Carolina right now. He's become the symbol of the low country judicial corruption discussed at his frauds, unfortunately created in some minds, but not Alec Murdaugh, exception to the due process rights enjoyed by all Americans, regardless of guilt or innocence. Those minds may delight in the irony that he may very well be a victim of the corruption he symbolizes. Federal law enforcement has long acted as a shield that protects popular passions, that prevents popular passions against a hated person from injuring the rights enjoyed by all persons. I ask that they do so again here. So in taking this appeal on direct review, which is what the South Carolina Supreme Court has done, they are agreeing with the defense that this was a matter of broad public import and impacting a significant number of people. It involves a constitutional right. And I believe that Alec will be, the Judge Toll's ruling will be overturned and Alec will be granted a new trial. And I believe at that new trial, hopefully Mark Tinsley will not be allowed within a mile of the prosecution's table because his influence over the first trial is absolutely toxic.
Yeah, well,
so in a summary, and all right, Jim, you give us a summary in a legalese, in a layman's.
Well, I don't want to get into Elaine's territory here, so I won't get into the legalese of it, but I'll try to dumb it down for everybody. Is that it's not to give him a new trial. It's to give him a new evidentiary hearing because they're going that the Green versus South Carolina was not the correct case law to put against Murdaugh, which means that the defense had to show burden of proof. So what they're trying to do is get a new evidentiary hearing, and that new evidentiary hearing will say yes or no to a new hearing for a new trial. So it doesn't mean he'll get a new trial. It means that he'll get a new evidentiary hearing. He'll get shot back down to the lower court. That's how I am.
I don't agree with Jim at all.
No.
I think that the issue here is whether the precedent set in Rimmer, which says that if there is contact to a deliberating juror, certainly in this case by a state actor, by the clerk of the court, that the content it's of and concerning a matter that the jury is deliberating about, that there is a presumption of bias, and that it's presumed that the conduct, the comments or the interference is prejudicial, and there has to be a new trial ordered. And what Toll said and what the prosecution said is, no, State v. Green is controlling, and in State v. Green, what the prosecution and Judge Toll did is they misunderstood State v. Green. They said State v. Green says that the defense would have to prove that the comment was prejudicial, and that's not what State v. Green said. State v. Green said if the comment is not of and concerning a matter before a deliberating jury or juror, then there is not a presumption that it's prejudicial. But in this case, the conduct was absolutely the comments made by Rebecca Hill, that there's already sworn testimony about them, that were of and concerning the guilt or innocence of Maggie Murdaugh, that is absolutely matters that before this deliberating jury. So State v. Green would not apply, or State v. Green is not in conflict with what the court should have relied on, which is the precedent in Rimmer, that the fact that a state actor made these kinds of comments, there's a presumption that the comments are prejudicial. So he will be granted a new trial from this, not going back to another hearing and another judge. They're going to grant a new trial.
Well, all I can tell you is that I just got off the phone with an attorney who's very close to the situation. That's what he told me. So that information could be wrong that I was just told, and you could be right, but I don't know. But either way, you're looking at either a new evidentiary hearing or a new trial. And I think that eventually what this means, Frank, is that he's going to get a new trial in the murders of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh.
Well,
but Jim, just to pick up your point, I don't know who you were talking to, possibly Jim Griffin, I don't know, but here's the deal. There's already, this isn't something to remand to another judge to reinterpret State v. Green or Rimmer. There's really not an issue of fact in dispute. It's a matter of constitutional law, and as a matter of constitutional law, he's entitled to a new trial.
I agree with you.
Yeah, we both agree. I guess here's the takeaway, Frank. Maggie Murdaugh is going to get a new trial, even if it's, there is no guarantee that any deliberating court is going to reach the conclusion that we think is so clearly consistent with our Constitution. And we saw that even with the sentencing of Rebecca Labyrinth the other day. She's at Praying Grandma. And so courts are free to do kind of odd things. That's why we have appellate courts, and why we hope that the makeup of our United States Supreme Court is sufficiently credible that they get it right, even if courts below them don't. So there's never a guarantee.
All right.
There's a lot going on.
The question I have is this: is there any way that this can get a change of venue? All right, because
of course that's not before the court right now at all.
It's not that would be. Now, what will they have to do?
He has a right to file for the change.
All right, they filed for the appeal. Based on the jury not being as it should be, and
based on the denial of his Sixth Amendment rights.
Okay,
that's what he's
that being said,
yeah.
Now, he would have to file something additionally to get a change of venue.
Yes. That's a simple motion before a court to say this jury, this community is whatever. He's not going to get a fair trial in Colton County, and we'd like the trial moved to Columbia or whatever. I think that that would be a motion that seems to me would be granted. I can't imagine a strong opposition to it. And I think that given that, see, if Alec is granted a new trial, we are no longer concerned. The remedy that he sought based on the conduct of Rebecca Hill is simply a new trial. If he gets the new trial, he's gotten the remedy he asked for, and then she's no longer relevant. The first jury is no longer relevant. All of that fades away.
Right. Now, I'm going to ask you to put on your mind reading cap.
Yeah.
Do you think that the defense recognizes the toxic environment of holding another trial in Carleton County?
Oh, it won't be in Carleton County. It will not be. I'm going to go and say it's going to be somewhere in Greenville, not even Columbia. Columbia is still too tainted. Greenville, somewhere out there. It's got to be big enough to be able to hold the amount of people that are going to come. So it can't be in some tiny little.
Oh, I was hoping that Wildeboro would get the economic impact again.
Never. You'll never see another Murdaugh trial there. At least an Alex Murdaugh trial.
Oh man. Well,
No, wait.
I'm not buying that food truck then, huh?
No,
Joel, not yet. Not yet. Put it on hold.
you could probably buy a Domino's pizza franchise.
Yeah.
You know who I sat with last night? The existing clerk of court.
Oh yeah.
That was what they did was they brought the retired clerk of court back.
Right.
As the clerk of court. But the existing clerk of court, well, the one that's serving now, was previously on the Carleton County Board of Elections. So they had to take her off the Board of Elections, leaving a void because you can't be an elected official and be on the Board of Elections because it's a conflict of interest.
Right.
So they had to take her off of the Board of Elections, and they had a void there. And then she was going over to clerk of court. Now there's a void on the Court of Elections. Now the legislative committee, and I believe this is accurate. It's what I've been told, and I walked out before the end of the meeting last night, that they are going to reinstate the current clerk of court, who was formerly on the Board of Elections. They're going to reinstate her on the Board of Elections as soon as she is relieved of her duties as a clerk of court. Now, on November 5th, there is an election for clerk of court, and both parties are represented. So, as of an inauguration date, whatever it is, I don't know if they run January 1st or February, whatever they run it. We're going to have a new clerk of court, and the existing clerk of court is a fine lady. Like I said, I met her last night. She's great. She will be going back to the Board of Elections. So no matter what happens with this case with Alex, you're going to have a fresh new face for a clerk of court.
Well, I don't think that's enough to sell it back into Walterboro, but I'm going.
No, I don't think so.
I'm going with Greenville.
Isn't there a grand jury looking into the behavior of her son and her? Who are we talking about here? You got too many clerks of court there, Frank.
Who are you talking? No. We only have one at a time. Are you talking about the former clerk of court?
Yes, I am. Yes.
All right. I don't know.
I thought she had to be removed. I thought she had to be removed because she had been elected to that position.
She resigned.
What?
She resigned.
Oh, she resigned.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what's the status? Because I do think this is important to the audience. What's the status of her son? Wasn't he indicted for wire fraud and tampering with evidence and obstruction of justice?
The last official notice was his notice of appearance in January of this year. That's all that's happened. Nothing has happened.
So the courts down there are about as slow as the courts up in New York, which is not good. But okay, so but I don't know. We don't need to pile on Rebecca Hill. In fact, I'd like to do an interview with her if she ever felt like it. Although I'm sure her attorneys would say hell no.
Oh, God, let's no.
Okay, but anyway, she's got problems of her own. You know what I was wondering is, the performance, the remedy that the defense, Alec Murdaugh, has asked for based on her criminal conduct. And by the way, her conduct in tampering, as alleged, is a violation of Title 18 of the U.S. Code, U.S. Criminal Code at 242. So she's not out of the woods at all. Retiring doesn't resolve what's happened, and what she did, if proven, is criminal conduct that she certainly should have known of. But what Alec is asking for right now is simply a new trial. That's the remedy he's asking for. But I wonder if he could sue her in a civil court for her. I wonder if he has a civil remedy too against her. And given that the entire community was sort of merciless about going after, I mean, they liquidated every asset Alec Murdaugh had, right down to the salt and pepper shakers, and sold it all off. And I think it would be certainly appropriate if he said, "Hey, turnaround is fair play, and I'm going after I'm going after whatever civil remedies there are against Becky Hill and anybody that aided and abetted her in harming me."
I agree with you on that, but he's, according to a lot of sources, he's out of money, and his attorneys are working pro bono right now. So, you have to go after assets. I don't know what Becky Hill's assets are, but I can't imagine they're in the millions.
I think they're in the tens.
It's a good idea, but realistically,
I just was curious about it.
Well, the Low Country being the Low Country could be called the most litigious.
Litigious,
litigious country, because you can't sneeze down here without getting sued. And if it's possible, he'll be on it. Because listen, somebody's saying on contingency.
There's no contingency in a criminal case. She doesn't have
civil. We're talking about civil.
Yeah, but she'd have to have some homeowners insurance or something. You can take a case on a contingency fee if you have the expectation of getting $20-30 million, because then it's worth your time to go to trial. But not I don't see that happening. But definitely, as far as whether Dick and Jim are they're right now they're representing Alec pro bono, but they've got book deals and they can make this work out.
The truth of the matter is, I got to tell you, I can't imagine that there is not a clerk of courts association statewide that carries some kind of liability insurance. Yeah,
they may be indemnified though. They maybe have some kind of indemnity because they're civil servants or something.
I'm out of my league now.
And I'm just. This is all distracting. We could move on to something I think that's a little more important, which is, where in the hell did we ever get the idea that Maggie was lured to Moselle the night of her murder? And when I looked at it, there's definitely this People magazine article by Steve Helling that was published on July 15th of 2022. But there's actually an earlier one from April 28th of 2022. This is by Liz Farrell, Will Folks, and Mandy Matney, back when they all worked together to produce a lot of content that drove this narrative about the evil Alec Murdaugh empire. So in April of 2022, they're talking about the high velocity impact spatter, as well as other evidence, also contradicts what the Murdaugh is calling Alec Murdaugh's ironclad alibi. So Jim knows, and I certainly know, and anybody that's listened to our previous podcast know, that on August 10th of 2021, the state knew that there was certainly no blood spatter. There might have been some DNA evidence, but there was no blood on the shirt that the state identified as the one Alec was wearing at the time Paul and Maggie were killed.
Correct.
And
let me make a comment on the blood. It's not a guinea, it's chicken.
Yeah, I'm not. I think it's a little bit of a distraction, but the state knew from August 10th of 2021. Okay, and the thing is, on November, somewhere in November, maybe November 23rd of 2022, the defense, Alec Murdaugh's defense, became aware that the hemotrace test done by the state on the shirt that they allege Alec was wearing that night showed absolutely no blood on the shirt, and that the state had withheld the information that there was no blood on that shirt from their own expert, this guy they intended to call at trial, this Tom Bevel, and not knowing that the hemotrace test had shown that there was no blood on the shirt. And this hemotrace test is highly, highly sophisticated, very reliable, and certainly would have detected any bit of blood, and there was none. Without knowing that, Mr. Bevel had identified, 100 or some different pinpoints that he suggested were blood on the shirt. And so they were going to call Mr. Bevel to trial. Instead, they had to call this other guy, Kinsey. But,
by the way, Kinsey got up in front of CrimeCon and pointed out those little 100 pieces. And he's like, if it's not blood, what is it?
It's not blood. What are you talking about, you moron? Excuse me, let me be calm. The most respectable test you can do, Mr. Kinsey, Dr. Kinsey, whatever you credentials, whatever credentials you claim to have. The hemotrace test said there was no blood, and the state knew it in August of 2021. Now, when Harpoon files this information in November, just before the trial's about to start, within a month, 2 months later, the trial started. He had in his pleading on page 4 of this 96-page pleading, get the year wrong. He said that the hemotrace test was done on August 10th of 2022. So when I first read that, I thought this is odd that a year after they've done other preliminary tests, they finally do a hemotrace test. Well, it turned out that it's just a misprint. Harpoon's pleading sometimes could be off. It was as though they didn't quite do a good grammar check or spell check or fact check of the pleadings they were filing. But as Jim Cask has pointed out before, this hemotrace test was done in 2021. What was that? On August 10th of 2021. So that's about 2 months after the murder. So the state knew all along that the shirt that they are claiming Alec was wearing the night of the murders had no human blood on it.
Well, hold on. Be careful on that brush that you're painting. It's a very wide brush that you just painted that the state knew there was no blood on it. No.
David Owen knew.
David Owen said under oath he did not know. So I'm going with what he said under oath.
Okay, yeah, because my thought was he's a filthy liar, and your thought is he just didn't know. Well, somebody knew because
no. My thought is not that he didn't know. My thought is that he said he didn't know. But Sled's forensic team knew, and they sent him an email according to him.
And he just didn't read the email.
Said he did.
Why would that be important?
Said he did.
The crime of the century, and he doesn't bother to read the email that says, by the way, there's no human blood on the shirt he's wearing when we are alleging he stood within feet of his own son, fired 2 shots at his son, and blew his son's brains out. But no blood was on the shirt he was wearing. I mean, that's exculpatory evidence is what it is. And it's enormously exculpatory. But what I don't understand is, given that Harpoon had that evidence, and at the time he had it, Kinsey wasn't going to be involved in the trial. Bevel was. Why didn't they wait till the trial to blow Bevel up on the stand? Just wait a minute.
By the way, there was blood on the shirt. However, it was not human blood. It was blood. It was blood from a chicken, not a guinea, a chicken. And that proves, hold on, that proves that what Alex said was he took the chicken out of Bubba's mouth and put the chicken up. So when he did that and took it out of his mouth, he got some of the blood from the chicken on his shirt, which means the shirt he was wearing at the time when they were still alive, and was the same shirt he was wearing when the first sheriff came on the scene with the body cam, which is green. Yes. So
So it blows all of his testimony out of the water. It blows the housekeeper's testimony. It makes it completely irrelevant. Her testimony that she thinks he was wearing a different shirt. I went back and looked at that again today. We talked about that before. But anyhow.
Well, he said he did shower. Anyways. Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah, he said he did shower. So after he and Paul were out running around.
I don't even care. The shirt that the state alleges he was wearing did not have human blood on it, but it did have chicken blood. That's not a guinea, that's a chicken blood on it.
Yeah.
So it's exculpatory evidence, flat out. But anyway, that's okay. But here's the rest of this that Maggie was lured. So this Fitz News article says that Maggie, they have it on good, from reliable sources, multiple sources, close to the investigation, confirmed that prior to June 7th, and at the time of her death, Maggie was living apart from Alec at Escovine Chone. Ding, ding, ding. Maggie and Alec were living together. She had spent Sunday night at Moselle. She wasn't lured from the home in Edisto. They had spent the weekend at whatever game that was, a baseball game,
UNC Gamecocks. It was a College World Series.
Okay, and this gets better. And it was, they also, Fitz News says that, they say about, they can't independently confirm that Maggie met with a divorce attorney. If you can't confirm it, maybe you ought not publish it until you can. But anyway, they published it anyway, because a lot of innuendo adds up to something in the minds of the public. So you can't independently confirm that. It's because there was no confirmation of it because it didn't happen. How about that, Mr. Folks? But anyway, they also say that this rumor, but they think it's consistent with this rocky relationship Fitz News is asserting that they have, even though at trial they appear to have a rather loving relationship. And this is in part because of a rumored affair Alec was having with another attorney. I don't believe there was ever any evidence of that at trial. Maybe they just decided it wasn't relevant, or maybe, I don't know, who knows. Actually, additionally, on the evening of June 7th, Maggie drove to Moselle, the family's 1,700-acre hunting property in Islandton, because Alex had asked her to meet him there. So, no, she was staying there. She had stayed there that morning. She had stayed there the night before. That's where she was staying. They were remodeling, or they were sort of redecorating the Edisto Beach House for this party they were having on the 4th of July. But this article goes on to say that Maggie expressed a hesitancy to meet with her estranged husband to at least 3 other people. He wasn't an estranged husband, but it goes from being speculation earlier in the article to now being asserted as fact. They say that her phone was found in the woods a short distance from Moselle. It was actually found on the side of the road. They talk about that Alec stayed with his in-laws after the murder, and they have sources that say that Alec didn't like his in-laws. What they talk about, though, is more here. They're quoting just the nature of the relationship between Alec and Maggie, and Alec and his kids. That, what I want to know now is, I'd like to have, well, you can't do this because he's going to say he has confidentiality based on he's a journalist and these are news sources, and so he doesn't have to divulge them. But there were a lot of leaks of information to Will Folks, Mandy Matney, and Liz Farrell that proved to be entirely false. But it was never false and exculpatory. It was always false and very damning of Alec Murdaugh as a husband, as a man, as a father. And it helped to generate this. He wasn't just an attorney engaged in white-collar crime, which he did. He admitted to it. He did it for sure. But he was just evil personified. But anyway, so in July, Steve Helling picks up on this, and he's got...
Who's Steve Helling?
He's this attorney with People Magazine. He's this... If you follow him...
You gotta tell us who you're talking about. We don't know who Steve Helling is.
Steve Helling is a reporter with People Magazine who, what I have heard, my sources confirm, and I'll name one of them, Dana Kennedy, said that the guy's got no credibility at all. He never could, he doesn't cite his sources. But what he says here is, according to law enforcement sources close to the investigation, let's see, what does he say? He's got all kinds of stuff. They hit a rough patch in their marriage. She was staying at the family beach house on Edisto Island. She'd initially declined to meet Alec at the family home. She was staying there. She'd slept with him the night before. They had breakfast. She got up, she left. There's testimony that she told Blanca.
Where did she have breakfast? Where did she have breakfast? Where did she eat? Where did she sleep?
At Moselle.
At Moselle.
So anyway, yeah, at Moselle. But he talks about blood spatter. So this high velocity impact spatter, which they wanted to later say, we never said blood, it was just brain tissue. Well, Steve Helling calls it blood, and he's not beating around the bush. He's not waiting.
Yeah, listen, you take a 12-gauge shotgun and put it inches within somebody and shoot it twice. Once of them takes their head out of their skull. I guarantee you, 100%, without a doubt, you will have so much blood on your shirt, on your face, in your hair. You'll almost be unrecognizable. You look like somebody come out of a horror film. I mean, that is fact. I don't care. That is a fact. Go ahead and try to say it's not.
Okay, so anyway, but he said again.
It's not so anyway. It's not so anyway. You just can't pass that over. Shooting somebody that close range will have blood all over it. And guys like Kinsey and this other guy out of Oklahoma are saying, oh, no, there's blood on it. There's no blood on it. Take it from SLED. They did the test on it. There's no blood.
Well, but here's People magazine talking about this. He says,
People magazine. Why don't they stick the sexiest man of the year instead of doing this hard-driven stuff from Los Angeles, California?
Now listen to this. This is the direct quote. Investigators with the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division SLED have not divulged what evidence they have, but the law enforcement source tells People blood spatter allegedly found at Alec Murdaugh's clothes indicates that he was at the scene at the time of the murder, not visiting his family in the hospital later. My point here is that this article, People magazine is believed. Nobody understands how crappy. I can't think.
But they got that from Fitz News.
I would say so, but it doesn't.
Fitz News said they got it from SLED. They said they got it from reliable sources within SLED. So that is telling me that SLED lied to Fitz News to sway them to leak a story that is non-existent. And they knew that they would go out and print it. There's no law that says that police cannot lie to you. They can lie to you all day long. It's up to you whether you want to believe them or not. So they printed a story based off of multiple sources that said the same thing, which were all lies.
What they had is a dynamic I saw where you have somebody that publishes a story that is totally just made up out of thin air. We see this all the time, made up out of thin air, and then you get another source to republish it, and then you get a third source to publish it, and then it becomes true because it's been published 3 times, even though it wasn't true the first time it was published.
Yeah.
So here's an April 26th article that says high velocity impact spatter directly ties Alec Murdaugh to double homicide. This is again a Fitz News story. Jim, you and I go around and around about why I don't think it's sufficient for Will Folks to simply say, well, we all make mistakes. I'm sorry about this coverage wrong. No, this wasn't one mistake, Mr. Folks. It was a concerted, deliberate effort over an extended period of time, over a couple of years actually, to deceive or mislead the public and in every way vilify Alec Murdaugh. And Jim, you and I spoke to somebody yesterday or the other day. He's an investigator. I don't think we need to necessarily name him, but if you want to, you can. And he is absolutely sure that Alec Murdaugh is the most evil guy alive, and that Alec killed his, Paul and Maggie.
Right.
And yet, we asked him about any details.
I said, give me two pieces of evidence, 3 if you got it, but give me 2 pieces of evidence that you say directly links Alec Murdaugh to the murders. And he's like, well, I don't know. There's just a lot of it. I'm like, oh, okay, name me one.
No, and then when we talked about specifically what to refute some of the, he had been involved in investigating a death that is attributed to Paul and Buster. I guess that much we can say. And so, and when we said, but why didn't you ask this question, or this doesn't actually, that's factually inaccurate, he would concede that, he'd say in the conversation, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, I didn't look at it that way. Or yeah, or he'd say, I was only hired to look at this, so I never looked. I didn't look. You know, if the evidence that I had was 6 inches outside of the scope of what I decided I was investigating, I didn't look at it, no matter what it was.
Right.
And so when we brought that up, he basically backed away from every assertion he had made, or many of the assertions he made. And you're right that this is a guy that's been on court TV, and he's been interviewed, and he was on a Netflix documentary, and he's flat out is sure that Alex Murdaugh is evil personified. And I don't know, maybe he is.
Can't say why.
He cannot say why with specificity at all, but he is a former DEA agent and an investigator hired to investigate this.
So
I can understand if a housewife can't say I don't know why, but this guy was totally.
let's go back to the blood spatter in People magazine, because this really matters, and this goes back again to, I believe, Fitz News, where they're out there defending, calling it high velocity impact spatter. They're saying it's not blood. It's not blood.
Yes.
And I'm like, listen, just go define high velocity impact spatter. I mean, it refers to a type of blood stain pattern. Did you hear the word blood stain in there? No, it's not blood. It's a blood stain pattern. So come on. I mean,
No, because they got a lot of heat for that. At some point, I think they realized they were wrong. And I don't, if you search for all eternity, how many times Maggie Murdaugh, Liz Farrell, or Will Folks have said, oops, we got this wrong, you're never going to find it.
Listen, here, People magazine, I'm going to do you a big favor, okay? If you're out there and you work for People magazine and you don't know the answer to a question that you're going to type out there, I want you to go to your computer and do this. Type in GOOGLE.com and ask it. It'll definitely give you the answer of what high velocity impact spatter is when it refers to a type of blood stain pattern.
Unless the answer is related to any conservative point of view, in which case they won't have the answer. But anyway, so listen. But this is, so Fitz News did get some blowback about high velocity, because they really put a lot of emphasis on, we didn't say blood spatter, we said high velocity impact spatter, as though brain could be on the shirt and yet not have blood on the tissue. I'd like to know how you could expel with a rifle, the brain matter of this young man all over this shirt, but not have any of his blood also mixed in with it.
Yeah.
The whole position was so preposterous. It's outrageous to me that they still pontificate about how they're the expert on this story, and they got Jen Wood covering it now, and there's no accountability for.
Okay. Hold on. Let's go. I think we're straying a little bit. We're starting to pound on the media. Let's go back to what we were talking about. Was
Jen? If anybody deserves pounding on, it's the media.
Well,
I'm with Frank. Let's go.
I mean, I get it, but we were talking about Maggie Murdaugh getting lured, and there's two things.
I think this all revolves around, what the media has reported. It's obvious that they were,
right.
Their sources. All right, now listen, legally they don't have to divulge their sources, but I think that there's a point where, for the sake of the dollar, and advertising, and sensationalism sells, I think that they would be caught, that they were irresponsible. So that's just my opinion.
But here's the thing.
You go with it, yeah.
Yeah.
You know a lot about this.
So here's the thing with Maggie. All right, and I'm going to talk to you guys, and I'm going to talk to your listeners, and I want you guys to ask yourself this question. The divorce rate in this country is out of control, right? So a lot of people, and a lot of your listeners, have been divorced. And one of the things that I would assume, I've never been divorced, I've been married 25 years, is that when you don't like someone, aka you're going to divorce them, you're going to probably start pulling away from them. You're not going to talk to them. You're not going to tell them secrets. You're certainly not going to go travel to baseball games and spend weekends with them. But you're going to stop calling, and you're going to stop texting as much as you used to, right? You're going to pull back a little bit. And I'm here to tell you, I have a copy of Maggie Murdaugh's cell phone from, she had a Verizon cell phone bill. And the number one person that she called, actually, I'm going to tell you the top 4 people that she called and text. And by the way, it wasn't Blanca. Number one on her list that she called and text all the time was Alec Murdaugh. That was number one. Number 2 and 3 were a really close 2 and 3. And it was Paul and then Buster. And there was probably 30 different calls and texts. So virtually the same, which makes sense as the mother. But it also makes sense because Paul was living in and near Moselle when it's time of the murder. So he was home a lot from college. Buster was off in Rock Hill. He was starting a job at some place. So it was a little bit different. And then her 4th person was her sister. Well, that drops dramatically to her sister. It might have been 100 times or so, which is still a lot. And when you look at Blanca, who sat there and testified that she was good friends with Maggie, and that, Maggie confided in her this, and Maggie confided in her and that. She texted Maggie for a month from May 11th to May 7th to June 7th. For a month, 13 times she texted her.
In a month.
And 7 of them.
That's not good friends. So that's an
7 of them.
I'm sorry.
7 of those 13 were the day of the murders. And that was about getting Alec what? Food. Get him his special drink. Oh, there's something I want to do when I'm going to divorce somebody, is get them something special that they like. As stupid as Capri Sun is for a 50-year-old man, he liked it, and that's what she wanted him to have. And she couldn't get it. Why? Because she was going to Edisto. Why was she going to Edisto?
To get for the July 4th party they were going to have. They were having a hunting party that weekend. The weekend.
Right. Alec was going to handle that. Alec was going to handle that. And she was handling the family party she was planning for everybody on the 4th of July at Edisto. So she had what she called, or what other people had referred. No, she called it in their text. The Mexicans were working at her house, which whatever. But that's what she said in her text. Maggie did. But she had people there in her house. She wanted to be there. She had a doctor's appointment. She was running around. She was with Alec all weekend. She's probably a little tired of him, and I don't blame it. That happens. Even people who are married a long time and love each other.
But I have been, Jim,
So no one's going to convince me that she was trying to get a divorce.
No, you're not, when the marriage is ending, I'm going to, in my experience, you're not arranging 4th of July party. You're not arranging, you're not asking your housekeeper, and that's what Blanca was, a housekeeper who at trial just, because Maggie wasn't there to refute what Blanca was saying, all of a sudden Blanca was Maggie's best friend who had all these things to say that either were incredibly irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether Alec Murdaugh changed his shirt 1,000 times. The state says that the shirt he was wearing at the time of their murder, when they allege he killed Paul and Maggie, had no human blood on it. So I don't care what Blanca says about a shirt or what was in the the pot on the stove or whether she put it in the refrigerator, and all the rest of her testimony was totally irrelevant.
Not to mention the fact she had that surprise birthday. Maggie had the surprise birthday party for Alec at Moselle. Remember, she was calling Chris.
But you're not saying, hey, Alec wants Capri Sun and he wants a particular flavor. I think he wanted orange and all he had was lime or something else. Who knows?
Right.
But this is a woman that loves her husband. We know they had been together the weekend before. We know Alec was sick. He stayed back in the hotel room on Saturday. She was already at the game, watching the game. And he's saying, I'm going to stay. They've given me an extended checkout time. I think he was in the midst of withdrawing from opioids.
I think he said that.
What it's like.
I think he said that before.
Yeah, and so he's got explosive diarrhea and headaches and everything. It's not a fun thing to do. As far as I know, none of the 3 of us have been addicted to opioids. But if you pay attention,
if you're on opioids, you don't have explosive diarrhea. I can tell you that. You're not even going.
I know that when they were driving Alec from that, the fake suicide thing, when they're driving him to the rehab place, he does have explosive diarrhea in the car.
So here's what I'll tell you. As you know, I've gone through cancer, and I was on opioids because of the pain. It was severe pain. So when you take those drugs, it stops you up. And the only way to get unstopped, to not get too graphic, is it takes like a milk of magnesia type of thing.
Sure.
And that to get things moving along will give you what he is describing in the car and things like that. But that's how you get that.
Here's something that nobody ever talks about, and we know that the guy you and I talked to said he did not believe that Alec was an opioid. His reason for not believing it is that there was no way Alec could have taken, 50,000 tablets or pills.
Yeah, I don't believe that either. It was too much. He'd have been dead. I'm sorry. Even though
I think Alec was dead. Excuse me. Alec didn't say he took it all himself. He said he bought. I think he bought a certain amount, used some for himself, and sold the rest of it on, or distributed it on. I think Alec was in fact a part of a drug distribution ring. I think that. There was that prostitute that said she was at this party with Alec, and he's supplying not just opioids, but cocaine. This is a Will Falls interview with her. And then she said, yeah, he was there, but there were other high-profile politicians and attorneys and people well known in the Low Country that were there, and Alec was basically supplying all kinds of drugs. So I don't see, it's not a world I dwell in, but I don't think it's beyond possibility that Alec had drugs, that he's part of this distribution ring. And I don't think Alec ever said, no, I personally consumed everything I bought. I just don't think that that's what he said.
Yeah, well, you got to listen to what he says, because when he speaks, he speaks like an
attorney. He speaks like Bill Clinton. It depends on what the meaning of is.
Correct.
And so I know people hate that, and they hated when Bill Clinton said that. Bill Clinton was right, as much as I think he's a piece of slime and that he raped Juanita Broaddrick and other things. Bill Clinton is right. I was at the University of Washington, and we were talking about his testimony when he testified to that, and attorneys in the law school said he's right. It does depend on what the meaning of is, even though the rest of humanity said there's only one meaning of is. What are you talking about? Why are you being so evasive? And he was also being evasive, but strictly speaking, he wasn't wrong. Alec Murdaugh me the same way.
Gotta listen to what he's saying. Gotta listen to what he's saying, because his answer is not like a typical answer. You just gotta listen to what he's saying.
Okay, well, here's something else, because this brings this up to me, because I think this was an enormous lie that we all missed, and it still doesn't make any sense to me. So this Fisk News article from April 28th, where they're talking about Maggie Murdaugh being lured to Moselle. For some reason, this is something Fisk News did a lot. They would cut and paste they would have the beginning of the article was something new, and then to sort of fluff it out, they'd cut and paste what they'd already printed before. So they printed this many times before. But they're talking about Randy Murdaugh and John Marvin Murdaugh had appeared on Good Morning America in June of 2021. We all saw that interview. Tom remembered, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, but they put quotes around this. They say, Randy says, it's just hard to imagine somebody can be so sick as to do this, intentionally kill people like that. I mean, you see it in the world, we see it on the news, but you don't think it's going to happen in your small community to your family, Randy said. Okay, at the time he's saying this, what we didn't know is less than 2 months earlier, his daughter had been brutally attacked. The guy was going to kill the daughter. Then he beats her, physically assaults her. Then he rapes her, and she only survived. She ran naked from her apartment and barely survived this guy that tried to kill her and had brutally raped her. And less than 2 months later, Randy is on Good Morning America saying, you don't think it's going to happen in your small community to your family? And it just happened. This kind of extreme violence, it just happened to your daughter, Randy. How do you when he says it's hard to imagine somebody could be so sick as to do this, intentionally kill people like that. I mean,
right.
You see it in the world. There's something really, and this is what he says, I don't know of anybody that would truly be an enemy or truly want to hurt them. Well, maybe we should have asked, what do you mean by truly? That's that lawyer speak. It depends on what the meaning of is. Randy, what did you mean by truly? Because clearly your family in general have enemies that want to hurt you, because your daughter just got assaulted and raped. It wasn't just a rape. It wasn't just forced sex that went wrong. It was, he wanted to beat her to death, but decided that after he'd beaten her for a while, he might as well just rape her too. I can't think of a more brutal attack on a woman. I am a woman. That's my point of view on that. And somehow less than 2 months later, Randy doesn't think it's relevant, or what, did he forget it, or what? And how did John Marvin not say, well, wait a minute, Randy, what about your daughter? You know, there's something about this whole case from the very beginning that seems to me that one explanation for sort of odd facts is that the family knew that Alec was involved in the sale and distribution of drugs, that the family had been threatened, or Alec had been threatened, or Alec's family had been threatened because of something Alec did related to the sale and distribution of drugs.
Well,
and that's what that.
I have multiple sources that tell me that Alec Murdaugh was the biggest drug dealer in Colleton County in that whole area.
I've heard that, but I can't confirm that, and I don't like to repeat that. But
I have multiple sources that have told me that. So I'll say it.
Yeah.
Hey, Elaine,
yeah,
just revisit Randy's motivation again.
I don't know. We don't know.
I don't know either.
He's a father. He loves his daughter. I thought, well, didn't you think? Do you remember the Good Morning America interview? Because I do. I thought he looked under such incredible stress. I thought there's something going on with this man. He came across, to me, his body language suggested that he was very disingenuous. So I thought, well, what is that? Is he lying? What is going on? He seems so much in anguish.
Do you think it was scripted?
Well, no, I think he was in anguish. I think he's an attorney. They don't show emotion very well.
I think he was trying to protect his family and his daughter. I think family at that time
I think you're right there as well. But also, I mean, listen, his sister-in-law and his favorite nephew were just brutally murdered. I mean, that's got to have some effect.
But he knew it was part of a pattern. The thing is, I agree that would be traumatizing. But I think that the trauma of it was that his daughter had just been attacked, and then 2 months later, Maggie and Paul are killed, and he's saying, we've got to shut up because we're all fair game and law enforcement isn't going to protect us. That all of us, my other children, John Marvin's children, everybody is at risk here, and we've all got to shut up.
Yeah, maybe.
That to me is what seems like a likely scenario, because I don't think he's a bad person. I think that family has been traumatized in a way. If they weren't involved in the sale and distribution of drugs, but they just became a convenient means to get to Alec, you know, in a way, Alec did make them all victims. And I think that could be why Alec did not bring up the drugs at all at trial. He didn't bring up his niece. He didn't say, hey, look, our family was targeted. My niece was brutally attacked. He didn't bring up any of it. I think that Alec might have made the calculation. I brought all of this misery on my family. I am going to take it all. I'm going to take it all on my shoulders. I'll go to jail. I'll go to jail for life rather than risk raising a defense that could further risk any of them being in jeopardy. Because
maybe.
I have to tell you something crazy. I'm sitting here and listen, I love listening to you folks because you're so informed, and the only thing that I can do is speculate in fiction. All right? Now, if I was to write a fictitious novel with this kind of storyline, I would say that the rape of Randy's daughter was the first warning to this family, and the murder of Maggie and Paul was the second warning to this family. If this family and this criminal organization, in theory, fictitiously, if they were getting a warning from somewhere, that would be the storyline that the warnings occurred. First, the rape of the daughter was the first warning, and then the ultimate warning was the deaths of Paul and Maggie, And after that, everybody's done. Everybody's done. Nobody talks about anything. We're gonna use Alex as a scapegoat, and then Randy and John Marvin and Buster, they're all safe. All right, but their silence on whatever their crime was is silenced, and that was the warning.
Frank, think about this. Maggie's sister testified at trial. She never brought up that her brother-in-law's daughter had been raped. Think about how many of them were silent about this. Everybody was silent about it. That's odd. The whole thing seems odd to me, given how everybody blabbed, and they blab about things that aren't even true. You got Blanca up there saying, I'm Maggie's best friend or whatever, which I think is preposterous. But so it wasn't that they weren't willing to talk. They were willing to talk. They just weren't willing to talk about this. This sort of elephant.
And the testimony was well rehearsed.
100%, Jim. Go with that. I totally agree with you. Blanca's
They weren't willing to talk about anything other than the
prosecution
elements necessary to convict Alex.
That's right.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what they were willing to talk about. And
the judge allowed it.
In my fictitious novel, okay, it would be a lot more to talk about than Alex.
But Frank, we don't know that Randy's daughter was the first. We really don't know. There are all kinds of gaps in the world what's really going on.
Or it could be just as simple, guys. It could be just as simple as Paul Murdaugh was trying to get himself out of going to prison, and he was going to use the knowledge he knew of a previous murder that has been left unsolved. And those people who murdered that person decided, we're done with Paul Murdaugh in his mouth, and let's just get rid of him. They knew where the guns.
And that should be our next show.
They knew where the guns. They knew where the guns were. They knew where to hide. They knew everything. They knew where Paul was going to be because they followed his Snapchat, and that was it. And Alex said exactly what happened. He and Maggie walked, and she walked into the hangar. The guys who were hiding in the woods behind the hangar. Thought Maggie left with Alec in a golf cart because it was dark out. And Paul was all by himself. And they're like, we are ending Paul Murdaugh's mouth right now. And why would you do that? To cover up another murder. I mean, if that isn't motive, I don't know what is.
I agree. I totally agree.
Again, this is all in a fantasy world.
No.
I mean, this is all a matter of fiction at this point.
Actually, Frank, what Jim just talked about is a story he's sitting on. It's a little bit more. It's not so much fiction.
Well, he's a lot braver than I am.
Yeah. I'm diving into a rabbit hole that no one's been down. Can't talk about it yet, but I'm working on it.
Let's just talk about this. We're at about 58 minutes. What I'd like to do, and oh my God, you guys pose more questions than you do answers. Let us start to summarize and go forward with what we think we want to talk to in our next episode.
Okay, well, I'm going to say a little bit, and then Jim can end this thing, but he can wrap it up with a bow. But Jim's uncovered some stuff that definitely is explosive, and we can talk about that. And it has to do with motives for, a likely scenario for who killed Paul and Maggie. But it's his story, and I'm not going to butt into it. I think that the takeaway right now is Alec will be granted a second trial. We're a little bit closer to it today. We apparently have some disagreement about procedurally how it will happen, but I think it will happen, and I think we all agree it will happen. And I think that's a good thing, because I fundamentally agree with what Julian said, that whether we despise Alec Murdaugh, and people certainly do, and he's given people reason to despise him, it matters to all of us that the process is credible. That and that ultimately is what's at stake here. And so our Sixth Amendment right to confront in an open court, confront basically witnesses testifying against us, which is what Becky Hill became, is an absolute right that we must protect and preserve. So that's my take on it. And thank you very much for allowing us this opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think, just to close out the Maggie being Lord thing, a lot of people wrote a lot of things about Maggie Murdaugh and what they thought based off of who they spoke with or whomever it was. The facts are the facts. She called Alex and texted Alex as the number one. Number two, she's going away on trips with him, baseball trips, wives going on baseball trips. She went on the baseball trip because Alec loved baseball and he loved the Gamecocks. She didn't go to USC. And then you have, the surprise birthday party, her wanting to go plan and get ready for July 4th party with Alec and her family and other friends. Like the facts are she was in love with him, regardless of whatever you think of their marriage was. The facts prove out that those two were a couple. And I spoke with one of her family friends the other day, and one of the things they pointed out to me, they said if Maggie was going to Edisto for long term, she would have, without hesitation, taken Bubba with her. She didn't. She left Bubba back there because she knew she was going back, because she was having work done there. So she was probably going to stay there that night, maybe come back or whatever. But if she was going to Edisto for a long time, she would have taken the dog. She didn't take the dog. So, there's too many facts out there that are laid out.
And she spent Sunday night with Alex. She had, like you said,
right.
She had breakfast with him that morning. She wasn't lured there. She was staying there.
Yeah.
Did they have two homes? Yes, they had two homes. She didn't buy Edisto to leave Alec. They had it as their reach out.
But I will tell you this: the amount of times that it's put out there, the old George Costanza thing. If you believe the lie to be true, then is it really a lie? And if you just keep repeating the same lie over and over again, sometimes somebody just going to start repeating it, and now that lie becomes the truth. But just because it's printed doesn't mean it's truth. It just means it was printed. People just assume that, oh, well, it's printed, it must be true. No, that's not really the case.
Well, I got to tell you something. Unless one of you guys is going to buy lunch,
yeah. So
we're going to have to wrap this up.
I have a chapter. I think it's chapter 25 in the book, Defending Maggie Murdaugh, Not Guilty by Reasonable Doubt. It is available on Amazon. And we want to talk next week. I can go through basically minute by minute of what I believe and how I believe Paul and Maggie were killed and why I believe Maggie and Paul were killed. And it has nothing to do with drugs, and it has nothing to do with Alec Murdaugh pulling any triggers.
I'm all in.
That's worthwhile.
Yes.
Let's wrap it up, and I can't thank either of you
too
much. Listen, I get to say 3 words in here in an hour, and you guys carry the ball, so I appreciate it so much. We're going to wrap this up. This is True Crime in the Low Country with Elaine Greenwood of Superwork News and Jim Cask of Cask and Crime.
Crime and Cask.
Thank you very much again. Say that again.
Crime and Cask.
Crime and Cask. And I thank you very much again. And this is WVFF, Red Brick Patriot Radio at 97.7 FM.